Hello, so good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's CPHI webinar, Embedding Sustainability Capabilities in Medicine Manufacturing Operations. My name is James Reidy, Content Partnership Manager at Informa, and welcome. We have a very exciting lineup for you in store today, but before we begin, we just have a couple announcements to make. So firstly, we suggest using Google Chrome as Chrome offers the best viewing experience. This webinar is designed to be interactive. The dock of widgets at the bottom of your screen will allow you to learn about today's speakers, download resources, and share this webinar via social media. We will also be taking questions from the audience, so please be sure to type your questions into the question box in the control panel and place the name of the presenter at the beginning if you would like to address the question to a specific speaker. Lastly, if you're experiencing any technical problems, please click the help widget found at the bottom of your screen or type your issue into the Q&A area and we will offer you some one-on-one assistance. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our facilitator for today, which is Nicola, who's the Forum Director of BioPhorum. So Nicola has been with BioPhorum since 2019. She initially focused on raw materials and she has worked cross-forum to connect the technical supply chain and regulatory experts to develop a strategy future-proof raw materials for the biologics industry. She now leads the newly launched BioPhorum Sustainability and is excited by the challenge to connect people from all disciplines across the industry around this critical topic. So I'd like to hand it over to Nicola to begin the presentation. Nicola, over to you.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much, James, and thank you for the opportunity to share this important work. I'm really excited today to be joined by my colleague Clare and Shahida from AGC Biologics and Karl from Cytiva. What we're going to show you today is really the culmination of, I think, over 400 subject matter experts' input from across the industry. So BioPhorum provides a platform for the industry, the biologics industry, to collaborate and share and develop best practice together. And this work is really the culmination of that. We have had a lot of input from outside BioPhorum as well. So anybody who is either working in the sustainability space or is new to the sustainability space won't be surprised to know that there are many, many resources being developed, and rightly so, because it's a really important topic and we need to embed change quickly. What makes this piece unique is its specificity to the biologics landscape, and so that's why it's great to have our biologics experts alongside us. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, I'll give you a little introduction to BioPhorum, which will just set the context of why we're focusing on this aspect of sustainability. So sustainability is everything, everywhere, all at once, as somebody very famous once said. And we wanted to be really clear that we're focusing on a discrete part where we can make a significant change, and that is embedding it in manufacturing operations. So we'll talk a little bit about the gap that the model is filling. We want to sort of give you a view about how the tool was developed and how we see it being used at multiple levels, and then give you an insight into our current program and then an opportunity to ask questions. Really, this is the first of its kind tool for manufacturing operations. So we're really interested in your feedback as well in terms of what would make sense to include in future iterations, and to understand some of the challenges that you might be facing day to day. So please do ask questions, provide comments, and we'll integrate that into our thoughts moving forward. So just a little bit about BioPhorum. So BioPhorum is about 20 years old. We developed very much to support the industry's operational excellence capability. So if we go back 20 years, I'm fairly confident, even though I wasn't here, that sustainability wasn't really on the agenda. It certainly wasn't front and center. So if we go back 20 years, what was really important to the industry at that moment was increasing speed to market. So how could we eradicate some of those early challenges that the industry was facing in terms of commercial scale up? How could we improve our manufacturing processes to ensure that we could increase our yield, reduce our cost, and supply more product to patients more quickly? So our agenda has always been focused on improving productivity and cost reduction, increasing speed to market, and really looking at that sort of regulatory risk simplification. So again, 20 years ago, a lot of the regulatory frameworks that we had in operation really didn't support the biologics industry. It was novel, there were gaps in standards. So that's where we kind of came to be. And over the last 5 years, there's been a growing interest in sustainability and to focus specifically on those challenges that are faced by the biologics sector. So what we've done at BioPhorum is integrate sustainability alongside those other drivers for change. And what we hope to do is almost create a mechanism that we can understand that perspective as part of an ordinary business case planning process, for example, or ordinary business processes. So it's not this kind of third wheel that lives on its own somewhere in a corner, but it's deeply embedded into practices. And so the maturity model is a key part of that work. In terms of who we are, so we've got about 150 members. Probably just over half of those are biologics manufacturers. So many of those are license holders. Some of those are contract manufacturers who have slightly different perspectives from each other. And then a big proportion of the biologics supply chain. And the integration of the biologics supply chain happened probably 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And that was really around supporting the industry's transition to single-use technology. And what was recognized is that it was impossible to solve the challenges that were being faced at that time just within a manufacturing community. Actually, suppliers were integral to working through what some of those practical challenges were, thinking through solutions, developing best practice. And so the suppliers have been a strong part of the BioPhorum community for, like I say, over 10 years. And it's with that heritage then and that trust that's been developed over that really long time that we can layer on the sustainability agenda. So I just want to touch on a little bit about what we're trying to achieve from a sustainability perspective in BioPhorum. So BioPhorum sits very clearly in an ecosystem of many different industry agnostic and industry specific change agents. What we are doing specifically in BioPhorum is looking at biomanufacturing operations. And what we really want to do is progressively minimize the environmental impact of biomanufacturing. And the progressive is really important because we don't just want to design in sustainable practices for new products that are not yet available on the market. We want to think about making it easier to adopt those changes and work with some of the external players who can support us to make those changes to existing products. So thinking about the product life cycle and integrating sustainability there. So if we sort of take a walk around the yellow circles, to do that, sustainability obviously needs to be integrated into all roles and functions in a meaningful way. So how do we translate a corporate net zero goal into a process engineer's kind of project plan? How do we do that? We really want to be able to support the industry to report impact at product, process, site, and organizational level, so that decisions can be taken at the appropriate level. If we have the data, and again, anybody who's working in sustainability will know the data is a bit of, can be difficult to get in some scenarios, but I'm confident that we are getting better in that area, and there's a lot of work happening in that space. But once we have the data and we have the capability within our teams to make some decisions, then it's about prioritizing low impact materials, processes and sites. We're also thinking about how we deliver low impact products, and that's not just from a sort of logistics perspective, but we're also thinking about the drug delivery device end of things. And then finally, as I said, thinking about integrating that into the product lifecycle management. All of that effort is aimed at reducing emissions, responsibly using water, looking to reduce water where possible, thinking about water stewardship in stressed areas, looking at reducing waste, which is increasingly becoming a focus for many of our organizations who have, many of our member organizations who have zero waste to landfill goals. And then thinking about impact on nature and biodiversity, and not just the industry's impact, but actually the impact of the decline of nature and biodiversity on the industry, and looking at areas where we might need to pivot. And actually to pivot in this industry takes, you know, a good chunk of time. So we need to get prepared. So the maturity model, which Clare is going to talk you through now, I believe will is a tool in the kit bag, if you like, to start to address some of these challenges that we've set ourselves. So I'll hand over to Clare.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, everyone. Clare Thompson. I am a colleague of Nick's at BioPhorum. I've part of the sustainability team. I've been at BioPhorum for 2 years, and previously before then, I was working at GSK. And I've been working with Nick and also our forum, and like she mentioned, those are 400 experts to create this maturity model. But before we get into the detail of the maturity model, just going to get your brain cells working to get you thinking of some questions. We've got 4 true or false questions which describe the industry challenge that we're in environmentally. So first question, the healthcare industry carbon footprint is higher than the commercial aviation industry. So just have a think, true or false, what do you think it is? A couple of seconds to have a think. It is true. So talking about the healthcare industry as a whole, the footprint is equivalent to 4.4 of the global net emissions. So if it was its own country, it would actually be the 5th highest emitter. Next question. The biopharmaceutical industry is estimated to produce about 300 million tons of plastic waste every year. So true or false? This one is true. It is also hard to get exact data, and that's a lot of work that everyone's doing. But as an estimate, the industry generates about 300 million tons of plastic waste every year. A lot of this is single use and also packaging, and this poses significant challenges for waste and disposal handling. Next question. Global environmental, social and governance regulations have increased by 155% over the past decade. So how much do you think the regulatory space has changed for industry, across all industries over the last decade? Again, this is true. There has been a rapid growth of sustainability-based policy interventions across the markets. Obviously, this landscape is constantly changing, but there is still this constant growth of regulatory pressures that are changing across all industries and also the biopharmaceutical industry. Final question. So out of the 150 BioPhorum members that we surveyed, 54 have signed up to Science Based Targets initiative. True or false? So this is false. We actually have 86 members when this survey was sent in 2024. And as you know, thousands of companies have also signed up and have their science-based targets validated. So what these questions are trying to demonstrate is obviously there is environmental pressures. The industry is having a big impact on the environment, and not just in terms of carbon, in terms of impact on nature biodiversity through waste and water use. The landscape is changing, the regulatory pressures are changing, what we have to conform to at a global level and at a local regulatory level as well is changing and getting more and more complex. And also a lot of our members within the industry have set targets and they have published targets. What we've seen within our membership is that in combination with all these pressures, but then all the external targets that everyone set, there's sometimes a challenge with how to interpret or how to link higher level strategy and targets to implementation across the whole value chain. So what's happening in sites, what's happening in your upstream, what's happening in your downstream value chain, and actually implementing change across the whole. So that's how we started to come about the biopharmaceutical environmental excellence maturity model. It's quite a mouthful, that one, so I will say BEEMM or just the maturity model. So our members were really struggling to understand how to translate a lot of the strategy that's coming out into actual implementation. And even within our forum, within our membership group, they were struggling to prioritize what are the best opportunities to work on in BioPhorum where collaboration would be very valuable. And also within other collaborations, what are those best opportunities? Because there is a wealth of things to do. So this is where we started to create the maturity model, focusing on those 4 goals: reducing emissions, reducing waste, reducing water or responsible use of water, and then reducing the impact on nature biodiversity. And what we're doing within this model is really looking at the tools, the technologies, and the processes that people are implementing now. What is actually some of the organizations, what are their standard processes that they've implemented now to reduce scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions? What are they doing to embed circular design and principles? What are they doing to establish data transparency across the whole value chain? And what are they doing to make sure that they're sourcing sustainable materials? And then it's also looking at, if you go up a level of maturity, what are those tools, techniques, and processes that the leaders are doing? What are then some of the things that those people are investing in or keeping an eye on for the next 5 years? What are the things that other industries are doing that maybe the biopharmaceutical industry could adopt? And what are the things that in over 10 years' time would really need to be in place for the industry for us to be carbon neutral and nature positive and fully circular? What are those kind of much more future things that we think would need to be in place? So this is what the maturity model is trying to help organizations to measure themselves against. Here's the structure of the model and some example tracks that sit within it. So there are 3 different versions of the model. Each of them follow this structure of assessment sections. We have a license holder version, a supplier version, and a contract manufacturer version. This is to make sure that the content is as bespoke as possible to the person or the organization that's using it. A lot of other maturity models that are out there, they are either industry agnostic, and there may be lots of topics in there and areas in there that are not very bespoke, or they often sit at a much more strategic level. Therefore, they are more applicable to everyone. What this maturity model does, it takes a level down and is looking more at the implementation level. So it feeds up into a lot of different maturity models. The structure will be very similar, but it's really looking at what are the tools, techniques, and processes that people should be implementing. And then accompanying that, there are resources available to help you on how to do that. So going into the structure, we have global sustainability strategy as one assessment section. Then we have product and process development as another one. As an example of this, it could be how to implement eco-design principles for reuse or downcycling of single-use technology components. We have a procurement section, then inbound supply, facilities and product manufacturing, outbound supply, use of end of life, and then global data infrastructure. So this covers the end-to-end value chain of the biomanufacturing process. And as we have a supplier, contract manufacturer, and the license holder version, that does cover more of the end-to-end value chain. What it doesn't quite cover fully then is at the point of use and end of life of when it goes into the health industry. But it does cover that whole biopharmaceutical manufacturing value chain. What we're going to share now is just a couple of examples of tracks that sit within some of these sections. So as it stands, it's currently this is still being produced, it's still sitting within Excel, but this is an example of how the maturity model helps measure progress. So this is from the product and process development assessment section. It's talking about the eco-design, culture and practices. So it's got level 1, which is foundation building, going up to level 5, which is next generation leader. And we're not putting in exact dates, but the next generation leader will be probably achievable in about 4 to 10 years' time for most organizations. You've got simple yes or no questions to try and remove any sort of ambiguity and to make it simple enough to be able to complete relatively quickly. We're not asking for specific data around anything. This is a tool that's supposed to help people understand where they are in comparison to a whole journey of maturity. It's not there to assess them and give them a final score at the end. That's not the purpose of the tool. So we've got simple yes or no questions where people answer the question yes or no. If they answer it, they move to the next section. If they answer it, they move to the next level, and so on. We've also then got a wide range of case studies and resources that are associated to each track. So each topic that is raised in the maturity model, there'll be lots of resources there that will help someone who is completing the assessment or wanting to move themselves up that level of maturity to be able to look at those case studies, look at those tools and techniques within there and know how to implement that. So that's where they're able to move from the strategic level into an implementation level. Another example that we have is from the facilities and manufacturing space. So I've taken some of the water aspects that we have. When Nick mentioned that we've also been collaborating not just within the BioPhorum community, but we've also been collaborating with external experts. WWF came in and helped us with this section as well and provided their expertise to the water sections. So again, you have different tracks with simple yes or no questions to describe an increasing improvement of maturity. And then you've got those case studies and resources on the right-hand side as well. And this sits within the facilities and manufacturing section. Across each of the sections, you'll have questions that are related to reducing carbon, questions that are related to reducing waste and water. We're currently working on the nature and biodiversity questions. And because a lot of those 3 or those 4 goals are so interconnected, we've not separated them out. Each of the tracks could be impacting water and carbon. So now I will hand over to Karl to speak about how it can be used within organizations within our membership.
Thank you, Claire. And hello, everyone. I'm Karl Britt. I'm with Cytiva, where I'm responsible for our product sustainability program, which involves evolving our portfolio of products to support sustainable bioprocessing. And one of the wonderful and challenging things about sustainability is that we're all connected, truly connected in material flows and the waste we generate, and of course, the carbon emissions that we generate together. And because we're all in it together, we need these common frameworks and language and standards that we can all work within. And the maturity model is exactly that. It's a model designed to be used within the value chain. And coming from Cytiva, we're, of course, a direct supplier to CDMOs and license holders. I'm thrilled to have a model that we can all use together as a basis of more effective conversations and collaboration. And that's because the model, it creates a consistent understanding of the relevant topics and subtopics in quite a bit of detail, as Claire just showed, and the maturity levels for each and what maturity looks like for each of those aspects, from complying up to best in class. And we can all sort of sync up to these common definitions now. So the model is useful for assessing where we're at, for setting goals, for understanding and agreeing on the interconnectedness, the touch points between suppliers and CDMOs and license holders, and what we need and expect from each other to achieve our individual goals. One last thing I'll mention here, as a supplier, we're eager to compete in aspects of sustainability, and I think most suppliers are, how we can provide more sustainable products and services to our customers. And with any competition, there needs to be clear rules of the game, so to speak, standards that enable clear, fair competitions or fair comparisons. And the model provides much of that. It's a consistent language and clarity in what constitutes maturity and therefore value to license holders and CDMOs. I'll turn it over now to Shahida for the next piece.
Thank you very much, Karl. So my name is Shahida, and I'm heading the global sustainability for ATC Biologics. And I just want to say a little bit about the CDMO business, just so that get that clear. Why this means so much for us to have what Karl very correctly said, common language around this sustainability maturity model. So as a CDMO, ATC Biologics operates within a B2B business model, where our success is very tightly interwoven with the success of the customer. So we do not own the final product, our customers do, but we play a critical role in how it is developed and manufactured. So this creates a very unique codependency, where any change we make, whether it's in the process or it's the choice of material, it requires a close alignment and approval from the customer. This is how we work already today. So our operations directly influence the customer's product and also their sustainability profile, linking back to we make some choices, right? So this codependency also gives rise to a very powerful opportunity for shared value creation. So when we invest, as a CDMO, invest in more sustainable, efficient, and responsible development and manufacturing practices, then it's not only the CDMO or the ATC Biologics who will benefit, but also our kind of customers will benefit, because this supports their sustainability reporting, regulatory compliance, and the environmental impact of their products. So, for example, looking here on this slide, if we switch from conventional plastic to bio-based plastic, we reduce our own carbon footprint. But this improvement is also passed on to the customer, who can reflect that in their own product lifecycle assessments and sustainability performance. So looking across the value chain, it's clear that ATC Biologics shape the total impact of the product together with our customers. It's partnership. So whether it's from energy use, raw material sourcing, to emissions and waste, it all goes hand in hand. So this is also why collaboration is essential when managing customer projects. And this is also where this maturity model, with everything what Karl just said, aligning on the language and what it is that we can do together to reach the goal, to deliver high quality biopharmaceuticals while protecting the planet and its resources responsibly. So using BioPhorum's maturity model as a shared framework, we can align on the priorities together, and that can be not just plastic, it can be water use, cutting emissions, or adopting renewable energy sources. But using this framework, we all know what we're talking about. And I think that makes it so much easier. So giving it back to Clare.
Great, thank you, Shahida. So as both Karl and Shahida were mentioning, it's what we're aiming this model to do is to really benefit not just the individual organization using it, but benefit the industry as well. And starting with within the membership, what we've been able to do is we've been able to anonymize and aggregate the results. An example that you can see here during our testing phase when we were developing it, we're able to anonymize and aggregate the results to be able to form an industry picture. And what this industry picture does, it identifies where there's opportunities for collaboration. And we can use this to then inform what work streams that we prioritize in BioPhorum, potentially what work streams do individual organizations or what initiatives do individual organizations need to implement, but also what opportunities are there to share learning and case studies. So in those examples where one organization is going ahead above everyone else, can they share what they're doing with the industry? So gathering this industry picture is really valuable for us to understand where the maturity of the industry is. It also can be helpful to share that kind of high level picture back with some of our partners like the WWF, the World Business Council, to help them understand what they're doing and how what they're doing is landing within the industry. Are those things that they're producing making change happen? And are people able to adopt that? So this information is really good information for the forum to use to be able to help drive change. Then, Karl, back to you.
Sorry, I had a mic issue there. I'm not sure this was mine.
Oh, sorry, Shahida, over to you.
Cool. So, I mean, here you can see, based on divided into the 3 categories of license holders, CDMOs, and suppliers, what is the industry picture. So the assessment results for each assessment will be also in more detailed sections, as Claire also showed before. But here we can also see across the industry where the license holders are, and the CDMOs and the suppliers. And I think this also gives us another opportunity to identify where we can work together and collaborate across the industry. So again, giving us a structured way to partner with our customers, not just to meet compliance standards, but also to co-create sustainable innovation and advanced responsible development. Again, going up to what Claire said in the very beginning, okay, where do you want to go, and also how to become the best in the class. But again, looking into all the assessment sections, it's also about seeing here what is actually happening here, and also to work together to enhance where we need to do more. So the maturity model giving us the same language and understanding, also giving us tangible input for what we can do together. So I think with leveraging the maturity model, we can actually really embrace our codependent relationship across the industry, well, basically across all industries, but this is focusing on the pharmaceutical industry. But I think this can really help us to support each other and creating a value that lasts. Over to you, Claire.
Yeah, another case study that we have within the model is to help build internal roadmaps and to help build benchmarking against. So as an organization, you're able to see what your peers are doing, and you're able to then use that to help build a case study for your own organization to make change happen. So it's really helpful with that common language, with seeing what your peers are doing, learning from what your peers are doing, to go back into your own organization and say, this is how we can make change happen. Here is a case study or the tools, exactly what we need to do. This is how we can implement. So when we look at some of the data a little bit more closely in terms of how it can help collaboration within the value chain, when you have a big stretch of data where you have the top number being quite high, but then you have most people scoring much lower, this is an opportunity where you have 1 or 2 organizations being able to share a case study, being able to share their knowledge and share what they're doing to be higher up on the maturity. You then have areas where everyone's scoring relatively low, or they're scoring lower where the industry wants to be. This is an opportunity for industry collaboration where, as a whole, it would be quicker for us to work together to improve. It could be a regulatory blocker that's hindering us. It could be a technology blocker that's hindering us, but working together would make change happen quicker. Then there's also space for cross-industry collaboration. So if there's one goal or one area that actually, not just within the biopharmaceutical industry, but across the industry, the technology doesn't exist or it's not being well implemented, maybe there's opportunity to look outside of our industry for collaboration and technology partnerships where we can help accelerate change. Karl, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Claire. And I love this illustration because it demonstrates so well like the richness of the model, what the model makes possible now, as Claire just highlighted here. And I wanted to just add a few more pieces. So from a supplier standpoint, again, we can now see where suppliers and license holders are more aligned. And in this example, that the strategy and data section, generally you can see suppliers and license holders are scoring themselves similarly. And on the other end, in the procurement section, we're very different and apparently have different views on our own maturity in that space. It also, the data here illustrates the collective view of our industry with a number of data points in each category, but it can also be used with single license holders and suppliers. So 2 companies could bring forward their models and sync up in that way and get a better sense of where they're aligned, where they maybe have common challenges and where they're doing well together. So the data here could be the basis for industry-wide agreements and collective approaches like we've got highlighted there in the center. So as an industry, we all want to be at a level 3 or whatever it might be in a certain category by a certain date. And it can it can bring us a common energy and focus around hitting that certain goal. We can align our internal programs to that common goal. And I think a great example of that, a need for that kind of synchronizing is with product carbon footprint, so PCFs. And PCFs have become an important and common discussion topic today with suppliers and license holders. And I think it's fair to say we all are generally struggling in carbon footprint data because there's a lack of unified frameworks and how they're calculated and how we need to exchange data efficiently and consistently together. And I think the maturity model can help bring us together on topics just like that with a common framework we can all work from. Yes, back to you, Claire. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And then I'm actually going to hand straight back over to Nick to close us up before we get to some Q&A.
Fantastic. Thanks, Claire and Shahida and Karl. So hopefully that's given you a little flavour of what's possible. And what we've got here is just how we've used some of the insights that we've gained from working across that value chain to develop then, because it's all very well assessing ourselves, but then to develop some best practice guidance or shared positions on critical aspects. So this is some of the work that we've done already. We have, and that you're free to download all of those papers and integrate that into your own planning. We have quite an extensive program that we're working on at the moment. So we have, as Karl alluded to, we're doing a lot of work on product carbon footprinting and harmonizing the approach to that within BioPhorum, and integrating that into developing standards at a global level. So you may be familiar that there is a standard being developed called the PAS 2090, and that is looking at the environmental impact of a pharmaceutical product. And BioPhorum is doing work to support the supplier's input to that data requirement. So that's a kind of key piece for us. And then we're also about driving sort of change and looking for some of those opportunities. So we're exploring opportunities to reduce demand for energy in HVAC use and generation of cold water for injection. And we're also looking at different materials. So how could we integrate bio-based materials in this highly regulated environment? So hopefully that gives you a flavour. Really keen to hear your questions and feedback. So I guess I'll hand over to James.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nicola, for that. And thank you guys for a fantastic presentation. So as Nicola mentioned, we do have time for some Q&A. So just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the question box in the control panel and place the name of the presenter at the beginning if you would like to address a question to a specific speaker. So regarding questions, we have one here. So the first question we have is, what are the biggest misconceptions organizations have about embedding sustainability in complex manufacturing environment, and how does the BEEMM address these? I think this is aimed towards both Karl and Shahida.
Yeah, I could take a crack at it, James. That's a tough question. That's a big one, and I think one of the misconceptions may be that sustainability can be too fuzzy and it's difficult to quantify when we talk about organizational maturity and sustainability. And I think especially because it involves aspects like culture and strategy, facilities, it's so broad. And I see the model makes these topics easier to deal with. And it includes language that describes in common words this maturity continuum from level 1 to level 5. So you can read that and get a sense of where am I today in this specific aspect? Am I a level 1 or a 2? So it allows you to understand your current state and then set specific goals to move to the next level in any given aspect. So,
yeah, and if I may, oh, sorry, please.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add the part that when it says like complex manufacturing environment, having a background in EHS, it's always like, no, GMP says we cannot do this. EHS says we can do this. So I think this is also the concern about the GMP, right? So making changes, will it then be non-compliance with the GMP requirements? So that means, what about the patient safety? And here I agree with Karl, having that very specific language, but also I would say what Clare also presented before, there's so much extra in the maturity model. There are existing cases, there are more literature to get more knowledge, and also have those discussions with our people, basically colleagues in the quality teams, to make sure that we're actually addressing all over, making sure that it's also patient safety is the top priority, while we can work with sustainability. And I think that's also why seeing the maturity model and giving these extra tools really helps a lot.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karl. Thank you, Shahida. Question here for Nicola. What were the key drivers or gaps that you identified that led to the creation of the BEMM?
Right, so that's a great question, and I'm going to offer an answer, and then maybe I'll ask Shahida and Karl to sort of share their perspective as well. So my role within BioPhorum has been to create a shared agenda for change between between our membership, basically, so contract manufacturers, license holders, and suppliers. And we have been working on that for, we've been working together for a good coming up for 3.5 years. Finding a shared agenda sounds easy, really hard. So we started by developing a roadmap, which is freely available to all members and non-members of BioPhorum. And that roadmap, I'm going to say that things have moved so quickly in the sustainability space that aspects of that roadmap will probably have moved on now, particularly around regulation and the focus. So what I will add is we had a heavy focus on carbon in that roadmap, and the agenda has moved, and there is a much more urgent need to look at nature and biodiversity, hence our integration in the maturity model. So in terms of the gaps, one of the things that made it difficult for us to create that shared agenda for change was the absence of shared language and the absence of understanding and common definitions and terminology. And I think when we look at, so what are some of the pressing issues now? So one of the things that I see is that, there is a big agenda around reducing carbon. Many responsible manufacturers have set themselves science-based targets. A big portion of any organization's carbon footprint sits in their supply chain. So everybody turns left and says to their supply chain, this is something you need to deal with. And there's an element of that's correct. A portion of any manufacturer or supplier's carbon footprint is driven by their choice of energy supply and their location of manufacture. In fact, to be honest, even location of manufacture can be driven by the customer. So there's an element that sits direct of a scope 3 carbon footprint that sits squarely at the supplier's door. There's a big portion of that carbon footprint, though, which is driven by buyer behavior. And actually what we've not had until now is a mechanism to have some of those conversations around what is the appetite for change? What is the appetite for bio-based materials? What is the appetite for changing logistics? To transition from air to sea is a massive undertaking that can't be delivered by a supplier on their own. It's deeply integrated into the customer's requirements. So that's the gap that we saw, and this is our attempt to try and bridge that gap. So I don't know, Shahida or Karl, if you want to add anything to, because you obviously experienced it from the other end.
Karl, you want to go first?
Well, I honestly, I have nothing more to add, Nick. I think you perfectly summed up the situation. So I would say totally agree with the way you explained it.
Yeah, and I think if I may say just one thing is I think the roadmap, it is there, and I think it was a natural first step towards creating that shared language, to reach this point of creating a shared agenda. And again, going back to the the maturity model giving you specific input. So let's say you're answering a question, no, we haven't done this. Okay, fine. Then you're not getting the point. You're not getting to the next level, but then you know what you can do. And then you can go back to your supplier or your customer and work with them. So I think that's what the gap for me was also, that, okay, what to talk about, like where to start. So this is really great to have something tangible there. Thanks.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you for that, guys. Another question here is for Clare. So Clare, how do you ensure diverse stakeholder input, for example, like SME, CDMO suppliers, in the development of the model? So how do you ensure the input from these different stakeholders?
So it was a long journey and a complex journey, but I think it's the power of our members. So we have within our forum, Karl and Shahida are part of that membership. We have, I think when we started, 18 members as part of that forum. They're then connecting into their own organizations through their network to source different experts from across the value chain from their organization. They also then use their wider network to contact other experts that they've been working with from outside of the value chain. Not only did we source experts from within the Sustainability Forum, but we looked across all of BioPhorum, where we had over 100 different membership organizations. And we went to each different forum and said, you're part of this value chain. You may not have sustainability as part of your job title, but sustainability is going to be core to pretty much nearly every person's role. What are the things that you're doing or you're seeing within your specific area of the value chain that has an impact on carbon, waste, water, and nature biodiversity? So it's really harnessing the whole BioPhorum network from within the industry, but then also using that to go outside of the industry as well. And I've been so privileged to be able to speak to so many different experts from across so many different organizations. And getting that all together has been really great.
Brilliant. Thank you, Clare. The next question here is towards both Karl and Shahida again. So the question is, how adaptable is the BEEMM for organizations at different stages on their sustainability journey or with limited resources?
So I can start. So I think it doesn't really matter which organization. It can also be someone outside of the pharmaceutical industry, for that matter, because this is about each assessment section has some specific questions that you're addressing. And if the question is not relevant for you, okay, moving on. But I think what Clare also said before, by already having a questionnaire which is adjusted to are you a license holder or a CDMO or a supplier, it also makes it easier to go through what is relevant for the business. And then again, moving ahead, then you will also be able to know what to do if we don't have what it takes to come to the next level in the different sections. I think that is the core to this, because even if you compare it with, let's say, EcoVadis, which is a big hit, many customers want that, but the assessment is done by EcoVadis employees, right? Which is great, but then that means that you don't really get specific feedback on what you can actually do to show how you're progressing. You get high-level input, you get really good high-level input back to how we can improve, but here you actually have it all in one piece. You know what you can do, you know what kind of conversations and topics you can touch upon. So even with limited resources, well, then you go for the low-hanging fruits first, right? And then you can also talk with your, let's say for us, it will be like our customers or also with our suppliers, where can we join our efforts and then, have this partnership. So I think that's how I see this maturity model giving us an extra dimension.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned one thing, Shahida, that I thought was really interesting. I just wanted to spend a moment on it, is the idea that the model isn't set up as to be a credential, so to speak, like EcoVadis, like there's your platinum or your bronze or whatever. That's not what the model is about. The model is more about sort of self-assess. Well, of course, it's based on self-assessment, but it's to set up collaborations and conversations around what's next and where we need to move from one point to another point. It's not something to be touted, hey, this is our score of the model, just to be clear for folks.
True.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you, Karl and Shahida. So we've time for probably 2 or 3 questions left. So I will continue here. So another question that just came in here is for Shahida, actually. So Shahida, as a CDMO partner, what pressure do you experience from your customers on sustainability? And is it consistent between customers? And if there was a standard, would this help?
Could you repeat the last part, if it's consistent?
Of course. Is it consistent between customers? And if there was a standard, would this help, or would it help?
Thank you for the question. It's a very good question. It's actually also what we're addressing internally right now. So I would say the big customers, the big pharma, they require more because they've also been working with this for a longer time and they're much more mature. And that's also why I see the standard is very, very important. And here, I think this BioPhorum maturity model also supports the efforts that we are doing within Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive implementation, because that is one of the, I would say, the more, the framework that really helps you to kind of progress through sustainability on a high level, but also with detailed metrics. And this is where you need to move the things. There comes in the maturity model, giving you something really tangible to work with. Okay, what can we then do to reduce this and this impact? So I believe this is the question.
Brilliant. Thank you, Shahida, for that. A question here for Nicola. As the industry moves very slowly and change innovation is often seen as risky, what levers or approaches could be most effective in increasing pace of change?
Now, if I knew the answer to that, I would be a multi-millionaire. So change is tricky in biologics, right? And necessarily so. I guess what I would say is there is increasing recognition. So one of the big barriers to change is around the regulatory environment. There is increasing recognition and appetite from regulatory agencies to work with industry at scale to look at what are the big platform changes that need to be taken, that we could go through that hurdle once as an industry rather than get every organization going through a change piecemeal. So I think it's about identifying what are those big changes. And that's exactly where BioPhorum fits in terms of thinking about, say, cold water for injection and ozone adoption. How could we look at that as an industry and develop a kind of shared validation package that has support from a broad number of people? We could do the same for the adoption of bio-based plastics into certain areas. So there's a piece around looking at big changes that are genuine changes that we need to do together. There's a piece around integrating all of this change as much as possible into existing processes, so in existing product life cycle approaches, and embedding the change there. And then finally, I think it's about embedding things up front in you. Like it's going to be a lot easier to test some of these things earlier in the design phase. So it's about embedding that change, creating kind of shared vehicles for exploring change much earlier in the design phase of pharmaceuticals. So I hope that gives you a perspective.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you, Nicola. So we're almost out of time, so I want to finish off with the final question we got here earlier. So the question is around maturity model, and the question is the maturity model available for use by non-BioPhorum members?
Nick, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I can take that if you're not sick of my voice. Yes, our intention is that this maturity model is adopted broadly by the industry. So we're very interested in hearing about how and talking with interested people about how we might do that. So it would be great to get exposure of the maturity model with, say, Pharmacopoeia as they do their planning, with academia as they think about the next innovations that should be on page. And we've had a lot of interest there, and for sure individuals who are interested. So I guess contact me after the webinar.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nicola. So that's it for today. So yes. So look, I want to give a big thank to Nicola, Karl, Clare, and Shahida for taking part in this great conversation and for offering their fantastic insights during the Q&A. I'll also thank BioPhorum for making this webinar possible. And finally, I'd like to thank our audience for your attention. Thank you very much. And yeah, we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, James.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.